Okay, let's get started. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Brian Wood, a pillar of the Bell Homestead. Brian Wood is the well-respected curator of the Bell Homestead, which commemorates the life and achievements of Alexander Graham Bell and his family. Over the years, Brian has played a vital role in preserving and interpreting the site's rich history for countless visitors. His depth of knowledge, engaging storytelling, and passion for Canadian heritage have made him a beloved ambassador for the homestead, ensuring that the legacy of the Bell family continues to inspire curiosity and pride within the community. In his capacity at the Bell Homestead, Brian Wood has contributed significantly to educational programs, special events, and day-to-day operations. He is often praised for his dedication to authentic historical presentation and his warm, welcoming manner, which have enriched the experience of guests from across Canada and beyond. Brian's commitment to heritage preservation and public engagement has left a lasting impact on the homestead and has helped foster a deeper appreciation for Canada's role in the story of innovation and communication. We're looking forward to David's presentation.
Thank you so much, Darlene. Wow, what an introduction. That was wonderful. Thank you. It's great to be with everyone again. Today we're going to take a nostalgic look at how the telephone has changed in roughly 150 years. So 2024, in fact, was the 150th anniversary of the invention of the telephone. Today, I want to take you through how the phone has changed in our homes. So basically, how the telephone, in terms of the way it looks, the way it functions, has evolved uh, since basically the beginning of the 20th century. So by the 1890s, most people did have a telephone. And so we're gonna look at this evolution through the ads, the advertising that Bell Canada, or at that time the Bell Telephone Company of Canada, was putting out there for people in terms of the new services, what the telephone could provide to them. And as you'll see while we go through this, some of these ads are pretty funny. Some of them, we look at them now and go, I can't believe they actually did that. But for the time that they were put out, they make sense. So I've called the presentation Life on the Line, the Evolution of the Home Telephone. And we are going to start with this ad from 1909. So as I said, by the 1890s, 1900, most people did have a telephone in their house. The telephone went into commercial use as early as 1877. So by the turn of the century, most people had totally bought into this idea of having this contraption in their house. So much so that by 1909, the Bell Telephone Company was now trying to persuade people to get an extension. They've already got one phone in the house. This ad tells us how invaluable, an extension set could be. So, as the ad says, in it should be found every convenience to add comfort and lessen labor. Most modern homes have at least one telephone, but why stop at this? An extension set, if placed upstairs in the hall, the sewing room, the den, or bedroom, will save wearisome stair climbing and countless steps. If you were to tell this to someone today, they'd be going, but I need to count my steps. I got to get my steps in today. This is trying to get people to, relax a little. Say, oh, why not reserve both mental and physical energy to meet the daily household duties and enjoy rest or recreation in the spare moments? The expense is trifling. So this is the important part. It's not going to cost you that much. Get an estimate from contract department and the number being 5460. Now, I want to point out the picture on the right side of the ad. So you'll notice it's the lady of the house. The gentleman of the house does not appear in this ad at all. So this is appealing to housewives. The idea that you're going to have far more time to sit and relax if you have an extension in the house because now you don't have to climb stairs. You can answer the phone on any floor of your house. If you look at the little boy sitting on the floor playing with his blocks, if you look at the blocks, it spells out use the bell. So even subliminally, they are trying to get people to use the bell telephone. So then moving a little bit further ahead, 1913. So this is still trying to get people to get extensions, and it's still appealing to housewives. The comforts of home are not complete without telephone service. A telephone is as necessary to the housewife as the businessman. One use of it may save the price of several years of service. It meets all household emergencies, illness, or accident, anything from a fire in the attic to a leaking pipe in the kitchen. So basically, if you don't have a telephone, your house is going to burn down. This is what they're trying to get through to you. No longer do you need to sacrifice time and energy to go downtown to make some purchase. So keep in mind, by 1913, we are now in the era where catalog shopping is becoming a thing. You can actually call in an order, and many people will remember being able to call their market, their butcher, the milkman, the dairy, what have you, putting in their order and having it delivered to the house. This way, you didn't actually have to go anywhere. You could just pick up the telephone to do it. It is a matter of a few seconds' time to get in touch with the milliner, the modiste, the dry goods store, the grocer, the butcher, or the baker. So some of these we don't even think of anymore. Uh, no milliners anymore. There aren't hat makers in almost any community anymore. The modiste, basically, that's your clothing store. And of course, in 1913, women especially were still having clothes made. They weren't necessarily buying off the rack. Um, a telephone in the residence places at the disposal of the wife and mother convenience, comfort, and protection that would otherwise be impossible. So now we're really trying to uh, pull on this idea of you're going to be so much safer if you have a telephone in your house. You and your children will be totally safe while the man of the house is away at work. So, and again, they're keeping up with style. If you look at the lady in the bottom corner, she's got her Gibson girl hairdo going on there, very stylish, and of course, very happy talking on her daffodil style telephone. You'll hear that model often referred to as the candlestick. That is what they called them in the United States. Here in Canada, we call it the daffodil. And because of that, Brantford's official flower is the daffodil, named so after that telephone. All right. Now we're into 1930. And even though depression is on, they're still working on getting people to use the telephone, to get a telephone. This is the era when movies have just started to have audio. And so it was a huge thing. Um, the silent movies had been a thing through a good portion of the 1920s. Now they're trying to get people to spend the money that they might use to go see and hear a movie on a telephone. Now, I'm going to do this so I can read it a little bit better. Hopefully, you can still see it on your screen. All right. So this says Mrs. Mills was thrifty. She would dearly like to tell her mother back home of her friend, as her friend told her she was doing every day. Sorry, this is really tiny for me here. I'm used to a bigger screen. Um, so basically, Mrs. Mills's friend has told her that she talks to her mother every day over the telephone. She was astonished when she learned that a call for the distant number the day would come, sorry, during the day would come to only 60 cents. And after 7 p.m., only half a dollar. She actually made her call after 8:30 and it cost her only 35 cents. the night rate. So now Bell has put into play different rates for different times of day. And I'm sure many of you remember that believe it or not, it's still the case today. But I still remember through the 70s, especially, my grandmother would only call long distance after 7 o'clock on Saturday night and before 7 o'clock on Sunday night. So between those times, the rates were much cheaper. Now the weekly 3-minute talk with her mother, funny how she keeps it to just 3 minutes. She can only talk to mom for 3 minutes. Uh, is a regular thing. And what a joy it is both to Mrs. Mills and her mother. But it is almost as good as a visit. So many people are like Mrs. Mills, they think long distance expensive. So this is not about getting an extension. This is about using your money to use the long distance service that the company has now. And again, this is at the beginning of the Depression. By 1930, people are starting to think, how do I cut back? I need to cut back our expenses. And the first thing most people got rid of was their telephone. Because don't forget, in this time period and up till 1985, you didn't own your telephone. You leased it from the Bell Telephone Company. So your monthly bill included the service plus the rental fee for the telephone. So for most people who needed to get food on a table during Depression, one of the expenses they got rid of was the telephone. This is actually one of my favorites. This is talking about using payphones. Now, I have to tell you, the first telephone booths went into service about 1885. This is before payphones were invented. So instead of a payphone inside the booth, there would be a regular telephone, and outside the booth was an attendant who would take your money from you. So there weren't a lot of booths because they'd have to have a lot of attendants looking after them. By 1890, telephone booth had payphones. The payphone had been invented, so more and more public telephone booths are being placed in hotels, department stores, restaurants, train stations. This is long before cell phones. So if you're out and about and you need to make a phone call, you're looking for a phone booth. So this story, to me, this is the ultimate Harlequin romance of the 1930s. And of course, movies of the 30s were very often these very sappy romances. And this is following that pattern completely. I'm sorry I was cross. It really was a foolish quarrel. Breakfast a few minutes late and unkind words as he rushed to catch his train. But so they parted, he to another town on business for several days, she to have a good cry and wonder if they could ever be happy again. The world is coming to an end here. Aboard the train, he realized that she must be feeling almost as miserable as he was. And so, as soon as his train got in, he hurried to the nearest telephone and called long distance. In less than a minute, she heard him say, "I'm sorry I was cross." And the world was bright again for both of them, all for the price of a movie. So again, they're trying to convince people, don't go out for entertainment, spend your money on a telephone or a phone call. Long distance is always ready in any emergency, great or small. It is quick, easy to use, and surprisingly inexpensive. So again, the world came crashing down because she didn't have breakfast on the table for this guy who apparently can't get his own breakfast. And now the world is all great again. So the 30s, once depression started to wane towards the latter part of the 30s, more people were getting their phones back again. And thankfully, for most people, that happened because then the war broke out. World War II broke out. And the big thing was keeping in mind that most people were still on party lines. So you were sharing your phone with practically everyone on your block. You would know when a call came for you, of course, when you heard the ring that was your specific ring on the line. But being on a party line also meant that people could listen in on your calls. You had to be careful about what you were talking about. If you didn't want the neighbors to know your business, you didn't speak about it over the phone. But during wartime, because people were on party lines, it was so important for people to follow telephone etiquette, to not be talking on the phone for hours at a time, because this is how information was getting to people. People were worried about their loved ones. People were wondering whether their son, who was overseas, was still with them, and the messages often were coming over the phone. The other thing to keep in mind, the central offices for the Bell Telephone Company were kept highly secure. The need to keep those telephone lines intact was paramount everywhere. And even to this day, the central office in Brantford is still that building at 86 Market Street. It is still a very secure building because every landline that still runs through the county of Brant goes through that building. And people that say, well, I'm on cell phone, I don't have a landline. All of the cabling that goes from the cell phone towers underground goes back to that building at 86 Market Street. So it is still very much a secure building, just as it was during World War II. But the big thing was reminding people not to leave their phone off the hook. If you're on a party line, you leave your phone off the hook. Nobody on the party line can now use it. So this ad is really explaining to people how to keep telephone etiquette at its highest. So again, wait for the dial tone, then dial. So 1924 is when dialing was first introduced. It is still not widespread though by the 1940s. Most people at this point are still on an exchange and using their operator. So even though this ad is telling people to wait for a dial tone and then dial, most people weren't using dial phones yet. But as it says here, that dial tone, a steady hum, is the signal that the equipment is ready to receive a call. It corresponds to an operator's number, please. And that's what most people were still used to, ringing up the operator and hearing number, please. Usually the dial tone is heard almost instantly when the receiver is lifted, but if the central office equipment is carrying an abnormal load, there may be a few seconds wait before it is heard. When you dial before hearing the tone, you prevent the equipment from getting your number. You may also prevent it from completing calls with other users. Wait for the dial tone helps the service to take care of everyone's calls. And then wartime telephone tactics, as it says at the bottom. Be sure you have the right number, consult the directory. Speak distinctly, directly into the mouthpiece. Answer promptly when the bell rings. Be brief. Clear your line for the next call. Use off-peak hours for long-distance calls before 9:30 a.m., 1 to 2 p.m., 5 to 7 p.m., and after 7 p.m. These things may look trifling, but on 6,500,000 daily telephone calls, they are very important. That's a huge number. In 1942, that many telephone calls going through the central offices is huge. Next ad, again, same thing. 1942, this is reminding people to hang up their phones. Don't leave the phone off the hook. It's not sabotage, but it pretty much is the same result for people if they can't make a call out or get a call in. With today's telephone traffic at an all-time peak, the off-the-hook habit can work serious mischief. And the off-the-work habit was something that people got into. People that like to have long conversations on the phone, the door would ring. They'd leave the phone off the hook to go answer the door. Or, a delivery would come. They'd leave, I'll be right back. Then in the end, they probably got distracted with something else and the phone got left off the hook even longer. Last year, 143,000 of the telephone troubles reported in Ontario and Quebec were traced to this course. When a telephone user accidentally leaves his receiver off the hook, he may tie up central switching equipment designed to serve many subscribers. And these may include key production men, executives, and officials who must get urgent messages through to war factories, government departments, and distant cities. Let's all help to reduce the number of busy and no dial tone delays by replacing the receiver promptly and carefully after every call. I'm not sure that um, we would even think of this today. Most people, I don't know about you. I've never ever thought of not putting the phone back on the hook after I'm done a call, but apparently during this period, it was very common. And I suspect that with being on party lines, some people did it on purpose to make sure the line was still open for them, so that the neighbors or whoever else was on the party line perhaps couldn't use the phone. Once the war had passed, the company started introducing, again, this idea of the phone being invaluable to housewives. By the 50s, things were booming again. The economy was booming. People were getting phones back again if they hadn't already during the war. People were getting extensions. People coming back from the war. The government had built wartime housing, so there's more and more houses that are needing phones. There's more and more subscribers coming. And as the men all went back to work in the factories and so on, the women were back at home completely managing their households. And so it was all about the value of having a telephone and what it could provide to your household. Now, the phone that you see in this ad was actually introduced as early as 1936. It is called the 302. This one does not have a dial, but most 302s do have a dial. And as it's saying here in the ad, look at all the things if you can see in the ad all the things that you can get just by picking up your phone. Furniture, appliances, food, clothing, furniture again, anything and everything that you need for home, you can simply get by picking up the telephone. Um, and as this ad says, in another way, too, the telephone is bigger value today than ever before. Now you can reach twice as many people as you could 10 years ago. That's because 10 years ago, not as many people had telephones. So, um, this is also where telephone numbers started to change. So, through the early 1900s into the 20s, basically your telephone number was the number that the sequential number that you got when you subscribed, when you became a telephone user. So if you were the first person in your community to get a telephone, your telephone number could literally be one. We have a switchboard here in our telephone gallery, and it is connected to a telephone. The number for that phone is 6. So for operators of that period, it was super easy remembering people's telephone numbers because they were sequential numbers. But through the 40s and into the 50s, more and more subscribers were coming online. And so they had to change up the system. And so telephone numbers of that period had 2 letters and 5 numbers. The 2 letters represented where you lived, your exchange. And here in Brantford, the 2 letters that were used were the P and the L. And so anyone that lived in Brantford during this period would tell people their telephone number. For example, if I used the Homestead telephone number, instead of 756, I'd say it was Plaza 66220. So with the 2 letters on the dial, people gave it a name. So Brantford's name was Plaza. Other communities had other names. And if you watch old movies, old television shows, sometimes you hear people giving their phone number. One of Glenn Miller's famous songs was Pennsylvania 65000, which was the name of the Pennsylvania hotel, the number for the Pennsylvania hotel that they stayed at. So at this point in time, everyone in a community was on the same exchange. So everybody's phone number in Brantford started with Plaza. And with this model, the 302, as I like to point out, most people call it the I Love Lucy telephone because this is the telephone that Lucy and Ricky had in their apartment through the first seasons of the show until they moved out to the country and they got the newest telephone. But you can see here, there's Lucy talking on a 302. All right. The next big thing to come, 1952. is when Bell decided to switch most people over to direct dial. To say there was pushback is an understatement because, again, most people were still used to picking up the phone and ringing the operator. And the operator, or central, as some people called it, was there to connect you to whoever you wanted to talk to. But the operators also knew what was going on in the community. If you needed the correct time, you called your operator. If you needed to know where the doctor was, you called the operator. If you wanted to know the specials at the market, you called the operator. She knew practically everything. She was the eyes and ears of the community. So a lot of people were very, very hesitant to change and didn't want to see the operators gone. They liked talking to someone. I suspect for some people, hearing the operator's voice perhaps once or twice a day might be the only voice they heard that wasn't their own. So for some people, it was very difficult, this whole idea of switching over to direct dial. But there was a need for it. Again, there were more and more people subscribing to telephones, getting telephone service. And so this is the year that Bell introduced what's called the 500 type model. And that's what you see in the picture. The first fully dial phone that uh, went into people's houses. It became a standard telephone until 1985. If you were to talk about just a standard phone, this is what most people thought of. But it became very obvious that people needed training on how to use their home telephone. This ad certainly walks you through it, but there were actually ads on television that Bell put out there. One in particular that I've seen where they had a very lovely lady demonstrating, just like Vanna White almost, how to dial a telephone. And they had this huge telephone dial, and she would be turning it, showing you how to dial your telephone. Um, and this model was probably the one that most people enjoyed talking on the most for great lengths of time because the receiver was totally designed to fit perfectly to your ear and in front of your mouth. Was probably the first receiver that, if you were doing something, you could use your shoulder to hold it to your ear. But the next big thing, along with this model, so the earliest 500 types had metal black cases. The next iteration of it, they changed the cases to molded plastic, which meant they could make them in color. This is what most people, once they figured out and accepted the whole direct dial uh, situation, the next big thing was, does the phone match my decor? Can I get a phone that matches my living room or my kitchen or my bedroom? In some cases, people were putting them in their bathrooms. It was more and more people rather were getting extensions in their houses. And of course, they wanted them to match the decor. So Bell went right ahead with this. This was the first time telephones had style. Before this, a telephone in your house was nothing stylish. It was a machine sitting on your table or hanging on your wall. Now, as you can see here, you can get them in 17 different colors. The most prominent through the 1950s and 60s was the avocado green, harvest gold. In the 50s, the pink and the blue were very popular. They're very rare now. Um, if you were more conservative, more moderate in your decor, you could get beige or ivory. If you were a little more adventurous, you got the red one. And of course, in the 1960s, the show Batman really promoted the red telephone that people wanted. So I love this ad because it is so stereotypical, it isn't funny. Dad is sitting in his easy chair talking on his gray phone. Mom is in the kitchen, literally stirring up cake batter and talking on her pink wall phone. Junior is standing there with a saw in hand because, of course, he's building something, talking on his red wall phone. And then daughter is lounging at the top, talking on her phone. Um, I suspect that this was also a way of getting people to get more extensions at the same time. But color reigned for upwards of 30 years. Um, Even here, this one is promoting the princess phone. The Princess was the first telephone to have a light up dial. And actually, I'll go back one because I can show you. So when you picked up the receiver, the dial lit up. And this is why the company was promoting it to teenage girls. They wanted them in their bedrooms. When they were supposed to be sleeping, they could still be making phone calls to their friends without having to turn any lights on, or perhaps their boyfriend, as it were. So there's the light up dial there. But again, here's all the different colors you could get through the 60s. Again, all along the side here, you can see the different colors. Um, for some people, color wasn't a big thing, wasn't necessary because, of course, with anything that's out of the ordinary, so in this case, black, you had to pay extra for it. So if you wanted a designer colored phone, you paid an extra charge on your monthly bill. The next big step was touchtone, which came to Brantford in 1968. So the wall phone that you see in this picture is known as the 2500. So this is the wall version of the 500 type. Touchtone again was a huge step forward, and actually came very quickly after direct dial was introduced. Um, and of course, like anything new, it costs more. So if you wanted a color phone with touch tone, you were paying a much greater monthly rental fee for your telephone than if you had a black rotary dial phone. Um, and funny enough, I remember growing up in the early 70s, my grandmother, who I like to refer to as a leftover from the Victorian period, lived in a big old house on Darling Street. At our house, we had a simple rotary dial phone, but she had a touch tone phone in her kitchen on the wall. So as kids, you'd sneak into the kitchen. Just what kid doesn't like pushing buttons? So we would sneak into her kitchen just to go push the buttons. And if she caught us, she would say, Central's going to get mad at you, which as a 3 or 4 year old, I had no idea what she was talking about. It wasn't actually until I started working here many years later and started learning more about telephones and telephone systems that I realized that the operators and the exchange were often just called Central. And so it was then that I figured out what my grandmother was talking about. But she got a touch tone phone simply because she had bad arthritis in her hands. And it was much easier for her to dial the phone with touchtone service. And then we have also in 1968, the first truly Canadian designed telephone. The Contempra was designed by an engineer at Northern Electric, which is the manufacturing subsidiary of Bell Canada. It is the first model to have everything in the handset except the call bells. So with the Contempra, you could get it again in many colors. You could get it with touch tone or dial, but again, the handset practically has everything in it, including a small button so that when you were done your call, you could hit that button, which would hang you up. You didn't have to place the phone back down on the base. You could simply dial another number. So you could literally keep the handset in your hand and make as many calls as you wanted. And it was considered one of the most modern looking telephones of its day, and actually was still well marketed well into the 1970s. And this phone you could either have on a table or you could have it mounted on the wall. Keep in mind, all of these phones that we're seeing were hardwired in, which meant you couldn't move them. They stayed in one spot. Houses, when they were built through this time period, just like there were electrical outlets on the wall, usually had a spot where the telephone was to go. The hard wiring was already there. And in most houses, the hard wiring was in the kitchen. I'm sure most of you remember a time when the telephone was literally just in the kitchen. The 70s was also a time where Bell got a little more adventurous with the models that they put out there. A lot of the novelty models were introduced. Now, the ones that you see here are kind of a throwback to the early European models, because through the 70s, here in North America, Spanish modern, Hollywood modern style was a big thing, and these phones fit that style. So again, lots that look very European. The last two are actually phones that are in boxes. Like they have a lid that opens and closes. So if you didn't want it looking like a phone sitting on a table, you just close the lid, and then it just looked like a lovely wooden box. Of course, just like everything else, you paid more for them. Here's some more of the novelty phones. So the Canada phone is a throwback to the old daffodil phones of the 1900s. The Alexander Graham plane, introduced in the late 70s, early 80s, was in celebration of the fact that Alexander Graham Bell did experiments in flight here in Canada at his home in Nova Scotia. He and a group called the Aerial Experiment Association were the first to fly in the British Empire. Their plane was called the Silver Dart. And so Bell decided to create a telephone that looked like an airplane. And this one now is, again, very rare. And some of you may remember the Mickey Mouse phone. Many people thought the Mickey Mouse phone was just the best thing ever. And only a few years later, this phone was introduced. This became a standard telephone in 1984. It's called the Harmony. It is the first telephone that only came in touch tone. In fact, the innards of this telephone are nothing more than a little computer circuit board. And it was so light that they had to put lead weights inside the cover to give it some weight because very easily you could pick up the receiver and the whole phone would come with it. You could get it in many colors. It could be placed on a table. It could also be mounted on the wall. It was very compact, still had a very comfortable receiver. But because basically it's all plastic, there's almost no metal parts in this phone. It was probably a very inexpensive phone to produce. So this is why the company was starting to switch over. This is the phone that started um, kind of introducing everyone to just using touch tone. But at the same time, it wasn't long after this that Bell started introducing some of those services that we actually take for granted today. Things like call display, call waiting. So that the next iteration of the Harmony phone had a screen, so you could see who was calling you. It would show you the number you had dialed. It had again, like a built-in answering machine that you could get. So you knew when you had calls, there'd be something flashing on the screen. So by the mid 1990s, phones had gone back to being functional again. There was really nothing in terms of color. You either got a black phone or a gray phone. Because at this point in time, people are now starting to switch over to cell phones, or more and more people are getting cell phones. So 1996 really was the last iteration of landline telephones. They didn't change much after that. But Bell really continued to try and keep us on board through all of that. And a lot of it was through their advertising, as you've seen. For those of us that have their ads in recent memory, these are some of the ones that I certainly remember. Frank and Gordon, the two beavers, were their spokespersons for many years. Um, the idea of long distance, again, still trying to get people to reach out to each other using the telephone. And then, of course, where would we be without the yellow pages? That listed all of the businesses and so on in a community. And today, you'd be hard pressed to find a child that even knows what a phone book is because we don't use them so much anymore. They actually do still print the yellow pages, but most people just look it up online now. There's probably very few people that actually go to the actual physical yellow pages phone book to look up a number. Um, and of course, with cell phones, we all have our numbers saved in our contacts. We don't even have to remember numbers so much anymore. I know I still remember my phone number from when I was a kid. I remember my grandmother's phone numbers. I remember my best friend's phone number, which apparently his parents still have. Um, Kids today don't have that need. And I guess the big thing in terms of phone numbers is that um, today we have 10 digits in every phone number because there are so many people out there with cell phones. First of all, by the 1970s, the idea of using two letters came to an end. They switched everything over to numerical phone numbers. For years, they were just 7 digits. Now we have 10 digits. We have to use that area code with every call we make because so many of us carry a phone with us. And so many communities, including Brantford, have more than one area code now. For years, ours was just 519. Now there's 226 and several others. So, although more and more of us have telephones, they're not home telephones. And so I hope everyone has their sentimental memories of their home telephone and kind of the fun they had with it over the years. It brings back a lot of memories for people when they see the phone that was in their grandmother's house, was in their best friend's house, what have you. Uh, so really, where would we be without the telephone? It has been a part of all of our lives, um, and I think will continue to be for many, many decades. So thank you so much for listening to this kind of walk down memory lane.